Hello everybody, welcome to number 27, I'm Jack. Now like me, you may have thought that the standard E-Type was absolutely impossible to improve on. I think that this car here today definitely shows you that that is not true. In this video, I'm going to talk to you about the story of the Jaguar E-Type Lightweight, and then we're going to talk about and take this particular car out for a drive.
Thank you to Bidding Classics for sponsoring today's video. Check out this online auction for classic cars with no buyer's fees.
So why then did Jaguar make a lightweight version of the E-Type? Well, in the 50s, late 50s, they had great success with the C and D-Type, winning Le Mans repeatedly. By the early 60s, when this was launched, the car division was under a lot of pressure in terms of production because the cars were really successful. The E-Type was really well received, and so they didn't have the resources to dedicate to the race department to bring out a whole new race car. The solution was, let's take the E-Type and make it into a race winner. The lightweight was inspired by Malcolm Sayers' low drag prototype of 1963. So that had a more aerodynamic bodywork, and the lightweight cars themselves had all alloy, glued and riveted body panels for lightness. The engine had an alloy block, and it weighed just 950 kilograms. In all, 18 lightweights were supposed to have been produced, and there's an interesting story behind that. I'll talk about that more in a moment. The semi-lightweights were less radical versions of the full-on race car lightweight. So they had aluminium panels, the interior was stripped, the engine was fettled. It didn't have the aluminium block, but it had Weber carbs and other bits, so it put out 290 horsepower. Now, part of the mystique of the lightweight cars, now they're worth millions and millions of pounds, and part of the mystique is to do with the cars that were produced. 18 were scheduled to be made, but in actual fact, only 12 full lightweights were ever produced, and there was always a little bit of a question of what happened to the other 6 cars. Well, for some reason or other, Jaguar decided they weren't going to go the whole hog and produce all of them. So 6 chassis numbers lay dormant for all these years. And then in 2015, Jaguar Heritage decided that they were going to make the remaining 6 cars. There was no blueprints for the original cars. So Jaguar Heritage actually scanned an existing lightweight E-Type to get the panels exactly right. But really, these were absolutely bob-on lightweights just produced, how long ago later? 50 years later, 60 years later? My maths is terrible. So this car was built to semi-lightweight specification. What does that mean? Interestingly, it actually has a factory works aluminium bonnet. It is also said that possibly it is the one that came with one of the original semi-lightweight cars. It's got an aluminium boot, it's got aluminium doors. The engine has been swapped out. So it was a 3.8. It is now a 4.2 race spec, but in road trim. So the owner assures me that it is really drivable. We'll find out about that a little bit when I take it out. Supposed to be putting out about 390 horsepower at the crank. I'm sure it's pretty light, so it should make for quite an interesting drive. It was originally imported to New York and sold there in 1965, then brought back to the UK in 1991, where it was converted to this specification. So it was in 1991 that Moss himself drove it in the Manx Mountain Challenge, and as a result of his feedback, it was even further fettled to make it even better to drive. It's a little bit intimidating, this car, and when you start it up, the engine is loud. does nothing to reassure you that it's going to be a friendly beast. And yet, as soon as you let that clutch out and start rolling down the road, it immediately gives you this feeling that it's actually quite friendly. The gears are really dead easy to select. Nice short throw. My big feet, I've just pressed the throttle and the brake there, but do you know what? It's actually remarkably easy to drive. It's a friendly thing. At the same time, you can feel that the engine is, I mean, it's just pin sharp on those Webers. The throttle response, absolutely bang on. Everything is very immediate. So the steering off center has a little bit of imprecision of play, but as soon as it kind of loads up slightly, really nice and light, it's just wonderful. Now, unfortunately, it is spitting very slightly, but it's enough to pepper the screen with water drops, which is just a little bit distracting when I'm already being assaulted on the sensors. The ride is firm, i.e. controlled, but it's really good. It normally has a bigger cushion. Richard, the owner, took it out for me and put out a smaller pad because I'm quite tall. Driving position, again, presumably if you have the other cushion, maybe you're a little bit more reclined. For me, it is quite upright, my legs are scrunched up, but the wheel, slightly offset, but it's exactly where you'd want it. Same with the gear knob. So, initial impressions are much less frightening than you'd think, even on a little slimy day like this. Brakes need quite a bit of force, but that makes them easy to modulate. Well, the noise is the overriding impression. I'm at 3,000 revs now, and those open Webers, because they don't have silk filters, they've just got trumpets. The intake noise, overwhelming. It's a really torquey lump though, so from about 2.5 it pulls really nicely. It feels like a light car. Get that impression that you don't have to fight the weight. Once you turn it and you get away from the initial sort of vagueness off center, it just responds really crisply. You're not fighting it. It's happy to go where you want it to go. Now the road is a bit drier, so hopefully on the way back we're going to do a proper pull and get a sense of the power. But it's an interesting car, this, because it's both incredibly raw in terms of the way that the engine sounds, but then the ride, although the body's well controlled, the ride is good. All the controls are easy. You know, the gearbox, 5 speeds, isn't heavy, it's not intimidating, the clutch is fine, the brakes do require a bit of a shove, but I think that's absolutely fine. The engine's so responsive, you know, it's quite easy to rev match. It's a little pussycat. Richard, who's Richard Moss, so he's actually a car journalist, he knows how to pedal. And he has raced this and so on, but normally on the road he doesn't take it past 4, but he has given me permission to do a couple of runs in which I'm going to take it up to at least 5.5, just to get the full experience. of that engine. So it feels like you, when you get into the tighter corners, the front end wants to push wide. If you give it a little bit more throttle, it tightens up. I didn't do that enough to break traction, wouldn't do that. But feels like the kind of chassis that you do have to drive on the throttle a little bit. Maybe Richard will tell me that's not the case, we'll see. Okay, let's do a little pull through the gears. Go. You know what? I only took it up to 5 there, and that was plenty. Keeps on pulling up to 5, and it feels like that's where you want to be changing up anyway, so I'm not going to go beyond that. Rapid. Those brakes, they need a bit of a shove, but they're so progressive, it just gives you confidence. You can drive it all day. It's just and although I've said, like, it's not an intimidating car to drive, you can see that to drive it quickly does require some skill, which I'm not sure if I have, quite frankly, but it's a nice dichotomy because I think you can pool around with it, no problem, anyone could do that. If you want to drive it quicker, it's the kind of car that will reward you, because to get the best out of it, I think you have to use the throttle. You have to drive it properly. It doesn't just drive itself once you start to really push on. And the steering, although quite slow, it's just wonderfully light, and yet you get loads of feel. How do they do it? I don't know. This car owes Richard about 150 grand altogether, and he is thinking of selling. He is negotiable on price. If you're genuinely interested, and please only contact him if you are, I will put his email in the video description. Now, if you have a car that you would like me to do a test on, then please get in touch either on Instagram or by email. Thoroughly enjoyed this today, honestly. What a privilege to drive this. Feels very different from a traditional E-Type, really, a completely different car. It's so much more sporty. You can feel the lightness, the way the chassis is set up, it's just much crisper. They both have their benefits, mind you. I'm not knocking an E-Type, which I love. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching, and what a privilege it is to be able to do what I do. It's just amazing, honestly. I just love days like these. The conditions aren't perfect, but what a car. Thank you so much. See you for the next one.